The day began like any other, with Sarah rushing through her routine. Her alarm clock had failed her, and now she was playing catch-up. Breakfast was skipped, her shoes were mismatched, and her work bag was hanging by a thread. But none of this seemed unusual for her chaotic mornings. She was already late for her presentation and knew that the day ahead was going to be stressful. As Sarah jumped into her car, her mind raced. She rehearsed the presentation in her head, checking her phone at red lights to make sure she had the notes ready. The city buzzed with its usual morning chaos, honking horns, cyclists weaving through traffic, and pedestrians hurrying to cross streets. What Sarah didn't realize was how distracted she had become. A single glance at her phone, a single second, was all it took to set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. It happened so quickly that Sarah barely had time to process it. 1 second, her eyes were on her phone. The next, the world seemed to explode in sound and motion. She slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The loud screech of tires echoed in her ears as her car collided with a cyclist crossing the intersection. The cyclist's body hit the ground with a sickening thud, and Sarah sat frozen in the driver's seat. Everything went silent for a moment, as if the world had paused. People began to gather, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. Sarah's heart raced as she fumbled to open her car door. "Are they okay?" she asked a bystander, her voice trembling. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but the damage was done. The cyclist, a young man named Jake, was unconscious, blood pooling beneath him. Sarah felt the weight of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just a minor accident. This was life-altering. The aftermath of the accident was worse than Sarah could have imagined. Jake was rushed into surgery, and the doctors gave his family no guarantees. Sarah was questioned by the police, her shaky voice recounting the events. The guilt consumed her as she sat in the waiting room, unable to meet the eyes of Jake's family. She overheard snippets of their conversation, his mother's sobs, his father's frustration, and his sister's quiet prayers. When the doctor finally emerged, the news was grim. Jake had survived but was paralyzed from the waist down. The room fell silent as the family processed the devastating reality. Sarah felt like an intruder in their grief, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave. Weeks later, Sarah found herself in court. She pleaded guilty to reckless driving, knowing that no defense could erase what had happened. The judge's voice was stern as he handed down the sentence: a heavy fine, community service, and the loss of her driver's license. But the legal consequences paled in comparison to the emotional weight she carried. Sarah couldn't escape the image of Jake lying in that hospital bed, his future irreparably changed because of her actions. Months passed before Sarah gathered the courage to visit Jake. She arrived at the rehabilitation center, unsure of how she would be received. Jake was sitting in a wheelchair, his eyes guarded but not unkind. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sarah began, her voice shaking. "But I needed to see you, to tell you how sorry I am." Jake listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his words surprised her. "I'm angry, yes. But I also believe in second chances. What happened to me? It doesn't have to define either of us." The encounter with Jake left Sarah feeling both humbled and motivated. She realized that while she could never undo what had happened, she had the power to prevent others from making the same mistake. Sarah began to research distracted driving statistics and stories, diving deep into the heartbreaking realities of preventable accidents. Each story she read felt like a mirror of her own experience. Determined to do something meaningful, she decided to volunteer at a road safety organization, offering to share her story as a cautionary tale. Her first speaking engagement was at a local high school. Standing in front of a sea of young faces, Sarah felt her hands tremble. But as she started to speak, the words flowed naturally. She described the events leading up to the accident, the devastating consequences, and the guilt that still haunted her. By the end of her speech, the room was silent. A young girl raised her hand and said, "Thank you for sharing this. I think it will make a difference." For the first time in months, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that she could turn her pain into something meaningful. Meanwhile, Jake was on his own journey of recovery. The rehabilitation center became his second home as he worked tirelessly to regain his strength. The physical therapy was grueling, and there were days when he wanted to give up. But Jake refused to let his circumstances define him. He discovered a love for adaptive sports, joining a wheelchair basketball team. For the first time since the accident, he felt a sense of purpose and camaraderie. His teammates became his support system, pushing him to see that life, though altered, could still be fulfilling. One day, Jake decided to reach out to Sarah. He sent her a video of himself playing basketball with a message: "This is what you helped me realize, I'm stronger than I thought." Sarah watched the video with tears streaming down her face, inspired by Jake's resilience. Inspired by Jake's progress, Sarah launched a campaign called Eyes on the Road. With the help of the road safety organization, she created a series of videos and social media posts highlighting the dangers of distracted driving. Her campaign gained traction quickly, with thousands of shares and comments from people thanking her for spreading awareness. Sarah's story became the centerpiece of the campaign, and she was invited to speak at national conferences and media outlets. But the most meaningful moment came when Jake agreed to join her for a joint speaking event. Standing side by side, they shared their story, not as victim and offender, but as two people united by the desire to make a difference. The Eyes on the Road campaign sparked conversations in Sarah's community. Schools, businesses, and local governments began implementing stricter policies to combat distracted driving. Sarah received letters and emails from people who had been inspired by her story. Some admitted to being distracted drivers themselves, but had changed their habits after hearing her speak. While the guilt of the accident never fully left her, Sarah found solace in knowing that she had turned her pain into purpose. Jake's friendship and forgiveness became her anchor, reminding her that even in the darkest times, redemption was possible. As Sarah's campaign continued to gain momentum, Jake found himself stepping into a role he never expected, an advocate for overcoming adversity. Through his rehabilitation journey, he had become a symbol of resilience, not just for those in his immediate circle but for many who followed his story online. Jake started a blog where he chronicled his life post-accident, sharing honest accounts of his struggles and triumphs. His writing resonated deeply with readers, especially those facing similar challenges. With Sarah's encouragement, he began giving motivational talks at rehabilitation centers, inspiring others to find strength in their hardships. One day, a young man approached Jake after a talk, tears streaming down his face. "I've been struggling to move forward since my accident, but hearing you speak gave me hope," he said. Jake realized that while the accident had taken much from him, it had also given him a new purpose: to be a beacon of hope for others. Despite the progress Sarah had made, she couldn't shake the lingering guilt and self-doubt. The campaign had brought her purpose, but it hadn't absolved her of the weight she carried. One evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, staring at the apology letter she had written to Jake months ago. She had never sent it. Her therapist had encouraged her to work on forgiving herself, but Sarah felt that was the hardest part. She decided to revisit the crash site, hoping it would bring her clarity. As she stood on the side of the road, the memories flooded back. Jake met her there unexpectedly, having sensed she might need support. "I forgave you a long time ago," he said gently. "But you have to forgive yourself. That's the only way you'll truly move forward." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she realized the truth in his words. The Eyes on the Road campaign caught the attention of a national news outlet, which invited Sarah and Jake to share their story in a televised interview. Nervous but determined, they agreed. The interview was an emotional roller coaster. Sarah recounted the accident and its aftermath, while Jake spoke about his journey of forgiveness and resilience. Together, they emphasized the importance of accountability, awareness, and hope. The segment aired to millions, sparking a nationwide conversation about distracted driving. Messages of support poured in from across the country, with many sharing their own stories of loss and recovery. Sarah and Jake's story became a symbol of how tragedy could lead to change. The impact of Sarah and Jake's story extended far beyond what they had imagined. Schools and communities across the country adopted the Eyes on the Road pledge, and several states introduced stricter distracted driving laws inspired by their campaign. Sarah began collaborating with lawmakers and nonprofit organizations, using her platform to advocate for systemic change. Meanwhile, Jake continued his work with rehabilitation centers, helping countless individuals reclaim their sense of purpose. One day, Sarah and Jake received an invitation to a national road safety summit. They were honored with an award for their efforts, but more importantly, they met others who had been inspired to take action because of their story. It was a full circle moment, proving that their pain had not been in vain. Years later, Sarah and Jake sat together in a park, reflecting on how far they had come. "It's strange, isn't it?" Sarah mused, "how something so devastating brought so much good into the world." Jake smiled. "It's not strange. It's proof that even in the worst situations, we have the power to create something meaningful." Their conversation turned to the future, discussing how they could continue their advocacy work. Both knew there was still much to be done, but they also knew they had already made a lasting impact. The film closes with Sarah addressing the audience directly. "Our story is just one of many. But change starts with each of us. Stay present, stay accountable, and remember, one moment can change everything." Jake adds, "And when life throws challenges your way, don't give up. Use them to grow, to inspire, and to make the world better." The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a powerful message: their actions matter, and they have the power to make a difference.